Tonight, a warm story from a small house at the end of a country lane. About a mother, a pot of soup kept simmering, a table laid for one who has been a long time away, and the lane she watched in the failing light, knowing he would come up it. Word had come that Will was coming home, and so all that day his mother had been getting ready for him. He had been away a long time, years, working off in the city and the towns beyond it, the way grown sons go. And he had written to say he was coming back at last, and would be home by dark on this day. Maren had read the letter so many times she knew it by heart, and she had set about making ready from first light, the way you do for someone you love and have not seen in a long while. The soup had been on since the morning. It was the one he had always liked best as a boy, the thick brown soup with the barley in it, and she had it on the hook over the fire, cooking slow all day, so that the whole small house was full of the smell of it, the smell that, more than any other, meant home to him, though he was not yet there to smell it. She lifted the lid now and then and gave it a slow stir, and tasted it, and put the lid back, and let it go on cooking, low and patient, the way it wanted. It was a small house, one room below and one above, at the end of a long lane that ran up from the village between the hedges. Maren had lived in it all her married life, and raised her boy in it, and kept it still, and it was clean and warm and waiting. The fire she had built up, and then let settle low, to hold its heat without roaring, so it would be just right whenever he came. By the door, the old dog lay with his chin on his paws. Floss, who had been a pup when Will left, and was grey now about the muzzle, and who lifted his head every time the wind moved in the lane, because he too, in his way, was waiting. There was no hurry. He would not be home till dusk, but she found she could not sit, and so she went on making ready, touching the house into readiness, one small thing at a time, all through the long, warm afternoon. So she laid the table. She scrubbed the tabletop white, though it was clean already, and spread the good cloth on it, the one kept for when things mattered. And she set two places, hers and his. His she set the way it had always been set, his place at the side near the fire, where he had sat as a boy with his feet not reaching the floor, and his own cup, the blue one with the white band that had always been his and no one else's, that had waited all these years on the shelf for him to drink from again. She set it down by his place, and stood and looked at it a moment, and went on. She got the bread out, and set it on the board, a fresh loaf, and the butter, and the little there was besides, and laid it all down the middle of the table within his reach. She did not cut the bread. He could break it himself when he came. It would still be warm. Upstairs she had aired his bed that morning, and made it up with the clean sheets, turned down ready, in the small room under the roof that had been his since he was born, and that she had kept as his, swept and aired, all the years he was gone, as though he had only stepped out and might be back any night. Which, it turned out, was true. And then there was the door. She lifted the latch and set the door on it loose, so that it stood unlocked, and a hand's push would open it, the way her own mother had always left it on a night when someone was expected, so that whoever it was could walk straight in and feel the latch give under their hand, and know before they were over the step that they were looked for and welcome and home. She left it so. Then she had done all there was to do, and the house stood warm and clean and laid and open behind her, and there was nothing left but to wait and to watch the lane. So she drew her chair to the window, where she could see the lane running down between the hedges, and she sat down in the last of the afternoon and watched for him. The light began, very slowly, to go. The afternoon gold thickened and grew long across the fields, and the shadows of the hedges reached out over the lane, and Maren sat by the window with the warm room behind her and the cooling light before her, and watched the empty lane, and was not troubled by its being empty, because it was not yet time. She had the old dog by her chair, and the fire low at her back, and the pot ticking softly on its hook, and she let her mind go where it wanted while she watched, which was backward, over the boy who was coming home a man. She thought of him small at that table, his feet swinging clear of the floor. She thought of him at the door with his bag the morning he left, grown and eager and a little afraid, and how she had stood in this same window and watched him go down that same lane and round the bend and out of sight, and had kept the watching a long while after he was gone. She thought of his letters, kept in a box upstairs, telling her of places she would never see. The years had been long, but they had not, she found sitting there, taken from her anything that mattered. For here was his cup on the table, and his bed made up, and his soup on the fire, and the door open, all of it just as it had always been, kept and ready, as though the home had simply held his place for him the whole time he was away, and asked nothing of him, and would have held it however long it took. Out in the lane the light went on failing, soft and slow. So she lit the lamp and set it in the window. She set it where it had always gone when someone was out after dark and expected back, in the window, facing down the lane, so that the first thing he would see when he came round the bend in the dusk would be that one gold square of light in the dark shape of the house, telling him, before he could make out anything else, that he was nearly home, and that the light was on for him. Down below, the village put up its evening smoke and lit its own small lights, one by one, in the dusk. A cart went by far off on the top road. Somewhere a gate shut, and a man called his cow in for the night. And the sounds came up the lane thin and clear, the way sounds do in the still of evening. Maren kept her watch. Now and then she got up and went to the fire and gave the soup its slow stir, and felt the side of the loaf to be sure it was still warm, and trimmed the lamp so it burned clear and steady in the window. And then she sat back down and watched the lane. The dusk came down blue into the lane and filled it. The far end of it, where it bent away toward the village, went soft and grey and then dim until she could no longer make out the bend at all, only the pale line of the lane running down into the gathering dark. Still, she was not troubled. He had said by dark, and it was only just dusk, and a man walking up from the town had a long way to come on his own 2 feet, and would come when he came. She had waited years. She could wait this last warm hour by her own fire, with his supper on, and gladly. Then Floss, by the door, stirred. He lifted his grey head off his paws, and his ears came up. He was looking at the door, and then he got himself up onto his old legs, slow, and stood facing it, very still. His whole self pointed at the dark beyond it, listening to something out in the lane that Maren, with her duller ears, could not yet hear at all. And then she heard it too. A footstep on the lane, far off still and unhurried. A slow, steady, walking step, coming up out of the dark from the direction of the bend, and she knew the step before her eyes had anything to show her. She rose and went to the window and looked, and there, where the pale lane ran down into the dusk, a figure had come round the bend and was walking up toward the house. A tall figure with a bag on its shoulder, coming on steady in the last grey light, growing surer and nearer with every step. It was Will. Even at that distance, in that little light, she knew the walk of him, which was his father's walk, with her own boys still under it. He was coming up the lane. He was nearly home. She did not run out to him. She had thought all the years that she would run down the lane to meet him when he came. But now that he was here, she found she wanted only to let him come the last of the way himself, up his own lane to his own door, and find it all waiting as it should be. So she opened the door wide to the dusk and stood in it, with the warm gold light of the house behind her, spilling out down the path, and the smell of the soup going out with it into the cool evening. And old Floss pushed past her skirts and went stiff and joyful down the path to meet him, his tail going as it had not gone in years. And Will, seeing the open door and the light and the old dog coming and his mother standing there in it, came on up the last of the lane a little faster now. Home. And then he was there in the doorway, filling it, bigger than she remembered, and just the same. And the old dog was turning circles at his feet. And he said, "Hello, Mum," in the low, grown voice that still had the boy in it, and stepped over the doorstep and into her arms, and into the warm. There was no great fuss made. There rarely is at the true homecomings. The feeling is too big and too quiet for fuss. She held him a moment and felt how tall and solid and real he was. No longer a letter in a box, but her own son in her arms in her own kitchen. And then she let him go, because the soup was on and a mother feeds her child. She took his bag and his coat and hung them on the old peg by the door that had always been his. And he stood in the middle of the small, warm room and looked round it, at the fire and the laid table, and his own blue cup at his own place, and the bread waiting to be broken. And she watched him see that it was all exactly as it had always been, kept and ready, as though he had been gone a day and not all those years. And something in him let go and settled, the way a thing does when it is set down at last in the place that is right for it. "Sit," she said. "You'll be hungry." And he sat in his own chair, at his own place, by the fire. And she ladled the thick brown soup steaming into his bowl, and set it down before him, and put the warm loaf by his hand. And he broke the bread, and bent to the soup he had not tasted in years, and was home. They sat late at the table, the two of them, and the fire burned low and warm, and the lamp glowed gold in the window, still. An old floss lay across Will's feet under the table and would not be moved. And slowly, over the soup and the bread and the small quiet talk, the long years between then and now have folded gently away to nothing. The soup warm in the bowl and the bread broken, the fire low and gold, the lamp still lit in the window, though the one it was lit for was home now and needed no more guiding in. The old dog asleep at last across his feet. The table kept, and the door that had stood open all afternoon closed soft against the night. And the sun come home up the long lane to the place that had been his all along, and would always be, sitting warm in it now as the evening folded down toward sleep.